I begin with the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. One night, not so long ago, I began to question my belief in the purity of the Bible. Because of this, I became depressed. I knew that God was there and I knew that He had sent His religion to man, but I couldn't find it. Why was it so difficult? I prayed and asked God, why did you send a scripture, the Bible, and allow it to be flawed? My Lord had answered my question even before I asked it. About 2 years after that, when I was 16, I had a religious craving. It was like a thirst that I couldn't quench. I thought I was satisfied with my religion of Mormonism. But the truth is, I wasn't. It was as if God was calling me. I decided to take a closer look at the scriptures. I put aside my Book of Mormon and picked up the Bible. I studied it from a point of view outside of what my religion had taught me. Since my religion taught me to interpret the Bible in a very specific and official way. Instead, I looked at it not as someone who had no religion, but as someone who wanted to follow the scriptures to their full extent. As I studied, I noticed how Christ taught only the Jews. He didn't preach to anyone else except the children of Israel. Studying his life closely, I noticed that this man did not follow any religion that exists today. He was a follower of God's law, the way it had been sent to the Jews in the past. There, my religion was questionable. I also read in the book of Acts that the apostles did not eat pork or any foods that had previously been forbidden by God. In other books, the followers of Christ, may God's mercy and blessings be upon him, followed all the laws and traditions that God had sent down in the past. Neither my religion nor any other Christians I knew followed this example. Studying even more closely, I saw that all Christian churches relied on the teachings of Paul, whose letters actually contradicted many of Jesus' words. I now knew that my religion was definitely at stake. I believed in one God, in Jesus, Moses, Noah, and all the prophets who preached the worship of one God. But what other books were there to replace the Bible? I didn't think there were any. Then I remembered what an old Muslim friend had told me. He said that Muslims believed in the Quran, in one God and in all of God's messengers, which included all the Christian and Jewish prophets. At that time, I had a book that explained Islam at a very basic level. It was a great source for me. I began to understand Islam much more and to find it interesting in some way. After that, I went online to research things about Islam. I found some websites with arguments against Christian beliefs and studied their arguments carefully. They explained how many Christians didn't follow their scriptures as they should. In fact, the Islamic websites confirmed what I already knew. My interest in Islam grew. I decided to ask my neighbor to lend me his Quran. I read it in a few weeks. I loved it. I believed every word it said. However, I couldn't believe that the crucifixion was a false story. I had been brainwashed by the Bible and couldn't accept the truth at the time. So, when the night came that I finally lost my faith in the purity and incorruptibility of the Bible, I decided to study Islam again. In my heart, during those 2 years, I knew that the truth was in Islam, but I simply couldn't allow myself to accept it. There were personal reasons for my stubbornness, reasons planted in my heart by Satan. That night I went online and began my new spiritual quest. I accessed many websites and requested information from many of them. I read some interesting facts about the Quran and told myself that this could be the way God had guided me. But it was still too early to tell. Just before logging off, I asked for more information about Islam. A few days later, a representative from one of the websites I visited sent me an email. He thanked me for my interest in Islam and told me that I could write to him at any time if I had any questions about Islam. So we started an online dialogue. He gave me a lot of information about Islam. I asked him a profound question. How do Muslims prove to Christians that the crucifixion didn't happen? He wanted to meet me to discuss it and I agreed. We met in a neighborhood pizzeria. Our discussion left me impressed. He showed me verses from the Bible that I had always overlooked. He left me with a Quran and a lecture on CD. As soon as I went home, I knew it was God's religion, but I didn't want to rush into it. Instead, I studied it more. All my studies led me to the same conclusion: Islam was God's way. Even so, I feared converting. Conversion was a life decision and I wasn't willing to take it lightly. One day, the brother I met wanted to take me to Friday prayer, the Jumu'ah prayer. The night before, Satan had hit me with all his might. He knew that I would make the Shahada, the public declaration that there is no God except God and that Muhammad is his messenger, and therefore convert to Islam. All night long he whispered things into my heart, trying to show me that Islam was not the way to go. In fact, his suggestions were so intense that I slept no more than an hour that night. I continued praying to God, reading the Quran and praying some more. Satan put so many thoughts into my head that I even believed I wouldn't convert. About an hour after I fell asleep, my mother woke me up saying that I had to watch the children until she got back from the hospital. My little brother Joe's toe was hurting and my mother thought it was broken. She needed me to stay at home with the other children so she could take him to the doctor. I didn't expect to be back until 6 in the evening. When I heard that, I knew I wouldn't be going to Jumu'ah's prayer. I had to be home with the children by the time it started. The brother called me. He asked if I was ready and I told him the story. He explained that he was upset because that Friday was the only one he would be free to take me there. He even said I could take the children with me. I imagined they would feel awkward there and said no. I told him to call me after half an hour. Maybe I'd have a solution by then, although deep down I didn't expect to go. I talked to my mother and asked her if I could go. She got some extra money for the children to go with her, freeing me up. I thank God for that little miracle, because that event changed my life. The Muslim brother later told me that he had counted on God to guide me to the mosque that day. When he heard that I wasn't going, he prayed to God knowing that it wasn't my choice. If I had to become a Muslim, it was God who would make me a Muslim. If I wasn't going to become a Muslim, it was also God's will. When the brother heard that I would be able to go, he was very happy. He came by to pick me up afterwards. On the way, I started to feel sick. I felt nauseous, weak, dizzy, like I was going to collapse. It was Satan doing this to me. He was desperate to get me away from the mosque and make me think I was too sick to go. In fact, they were minor side effects of having slept so little the night before. In the car, on our way to the mosque, I told the brother that I was thinking of changing my mind about doing the Shahada. He told me that it was my choice, but to beware of the doubts that Satan puts in our heads. We talked in the car about Satan whispering in people's hearts and how Satan tries to lead someone away from the light. He explained to me that only Muslims and non-Muslims who are in the process of becoming Muslims are strongly affected by Satan. He said that non-Muslims are usually left out, because Satan doesn't need to take them away from God, since they are already distant from him. He explained that last night all the thoughts that flooded my head were from Satan. Satan had put so many doubts in my head that night to keep me away from the light. That's how desperate Satan was. He knew I was going to do the Shahada the next day and he was trying to stop it. We went to the mosque and the brother taught me how to perform ablution, wudu, cleansing oneself before prayer. After the ablution, I felt like new and the nausea had left my body. I didn't even think about the discomfort anymore. I felt good to be in a place where God was worshipped. We approached the director and said that I wanted to do the Shahada that day, after the prayer. He smiled and congratulated me with a warm hug. Another brother who heard us did the same. He said, "God bless you and congratulations." They were beautiful people, people of God. They were the kind of people I wanted to be. During the service, the Imam surprisingly gave his speech about Satan's whisperings in the hearts of men in an attempt to draw them away from the light. This left me in deep shock. The brother was talking about it with me in the car, and by a surprising coincidence, the Imam thought it best to talk about Satan's whispers that day. This, I believe, was God conveying his message to me, telling me to ignore Satan. I was eager to declare the Shahada, and when the service was over, I rushed forward. After declaring my Islam publicly, I think every Muslim brother present that day came and hugged me. There were at least a few hundred brothers present, and you can imagine how many hugs I received. They congratulated me and said, "God bless you. You made the right choice." Two forces were at work that day, Satan and God. But God's force was too powerful to resist, and so I submitted to him in Islam. The brother told me that the greatest gift that God gives us in this world is Islam. This gift must be kept for the rest of my life, God willing, inshallah. He also told me that he had never been to a Friday prayer where the Imam spoke purely about the whispers of Satan. He said that the subject was mentioned occasionally, but almost never took up the entire prayer. I pray that my story will help those who are going through the same mental battle with Satan. My experience is so amazing to me that I can't truly describe it in words. I pray that those who read this will be able to overcome Satan as I was able to that day. As salam _alaikum, may God guide you as he guided me.